Hello, this is Pick, and welcome back to my developer commentary for Integration by Parts DX presented by FTB. The final major tech mod in the progression is Mekanism. Yup, we're already there. Hard to believe, I know. Or not, it's been over 2 months. To get Mekanism going, I'll need steel casing, which takes stainless steel. Stainless steel requires chromium and steel, the former of which is alchemized from Desh. Then, melt the chromium in the magma crucible, send it to a fluid encapsulator with some steel blocks, and stainless steel blocks result. This is a key material for anything involving gaseous chemicals. The first machine in Mekanism is the metallurgic infuser, which the only ingredient I don't have is rich slag. This can be obtained by throwing a number of different ores through the induction smelter, but none of the common ones. The only automatable one I have is Appetite, which I haven't set up yet. To increase the yield chance, some augments for secondary product chance definitely help. The partner in crime to the metallurgic infuser is the enrichment chamber. After waiting forever to do it, I can finally upgrade steel production. That being said, the enrichment chamber requires several iridium to produce, so that's part of why I upgraded the antimatter setup as much as I did in last episode. By the end of this episode, it'll be running on 2 full auto-fueled nuclear reactors, with a top-tier solar panel running the other machines. The enrichment chamber gets more out of your resources when using the metallurgic infuser, multiplying the infusion amount by 8. This is going to be essential when processing more expensive recipes. There are 6 infusion types total, but I only need 5 of them, as gold is not all that useful to me. Next up is the electrolytic separator. This takes liquid ingredients and separates them into 2 gases. Mekanism is fond of its gas mechanic, and while they're just glorified fluids, they do use separate modes of transport in the pressurized tubes. Of course, water separates into hydrogen and oxygen at a 2:1 ratio. Early on, I would recommend using gas tanks to manage your gases before you're ready for full production lines. They fit right into any machine that outputs a gas, automatically collecting. One last thing about the separator is that since it has 2 outputs, you can decide if you want to void one of the gases or just dump when the buffer is full, as to not clog the machine. To convert between liquid and gas, use a rotary condensator. This is quite the expensive machine, but I've added liquid alternative recipes to many gas recipes. Liquid recipes take up more space as it requires a multi-block, but you can bulk transport fluids much easier than gases, especially with refined storage or ender tanks. If you recall the energized health potion I've been making, it can be crystallized into a solid form that has usage in crafting recipes. For one, it makes life essence, but that isn't useful just yet. The main 2 uses are for flux networks and nitro crystals. After making an osmium compressor to turn refined obsidian dust into ingots, throw some redstone on the ground at bedrock. Above that, place an obsidian. Left-click the obsidian to convert all of the redstone into flux dust. There's no cap on how much you can do at a time, so just convert a few stacks whenever needed. These craft into flux cores, and then flux plugs and flux points. Late game power transfer becomes much simpler using flux networks. Essentially, this creates a cloud storage for your redstone flux. Power goes in through flux plugs and out through flux points. Since I'm playing in single player, I can just make my network public. The flux plug will draw energy from anything it's attached to, though the network needs a storage to actually keep it. Storages act on the cloud too, and they all contribute additively. It's still better to use induction matrices as your main power storage, but we'll get there when we get there. I'm about tired of having to go to a grid to access my refined storage network, so it's time to make a wireless handheld one. To use it, you need a wireless transmitter. The range is limited to 16 blocks by default, but can be expanded using range upgrades. Better than that though, I can make the creative wireless transmitter, which has infinite range, works across dimensions, and takes no power to run, just for a few more transmitters, a few nether stars, and an elytra. A very handy quality of life feature. To bind a wireless grid to your network, just shift right click the controller with it held. I've been upgrading the basement, and as you can see, there are many more machines. A crusher, some more auto workbenches, and an industrial squeezer. These are for making HOP graphite, which of course is used for electrodes for the arc furnace. That's right, with Mekanism unlocked, it's finally time to 4 times process the high energy ores. Get excited. Outside here, I have a system to send the ores to the mana pool for processing. A filtered vacuumulator collects the spoils. However, I changed to an exporter later from the crafter, as the system can handle it and it works better. This is a perk of single product recipes that goes in the ender chest, which then goes to the moon base for further processing. It gets compressed as before, but then gets sent through the purification chamber, which needs oxygen, and finally the arc furnace. Be sure to input your items in the left slot to actually make them go into the correct slot. This setup runs off of the solar panels outside, as the reactors are dedicated to the antimatter production. Eventually, this will all run off of the flux network, but power production isn't there yet. Now to grow some Tau fruit. If I want to upgrade my Mekanism machines into factories, I'll need some saturated Tau for the basic installer. Got some in the dimensional dungeons, and it can be planted like any crop. However, if an entity is standing over the crop as it takes to grow, it might become saturated Tau. This damages the mob but grows the fruit. To heal the mob, I can repurpose the regeneration lens from the blood altar. I don't really need it anymore now that I have the healing axe to get me back to my 30 hearts in a second. I'll get around to automating that some other time. Always good to reuse something that got phased out. Right-click on any Mekanism machine, or any compatible Mekanism machine I should say, to use the installer on it. This will raise the slots inside the machine from 1 processing slot to 3. Of course, if it's a gas type machine, it's not going to accept the factory input, but if it uses an item input, then it'll definitely work. I think it's finally time to upgrade ore processing. This will involve production of petroleum dust, which gets melted down in the magma crucible. There are a few ways of farming obsidian for it, but the easiest way is probably just melting down netherrack and freezing it in the blast chiller. This then changes the setup for processing in the compact machine. Instead of the item port, a slurry comes out of the fluid port, which then goes to the precipitator that intakes the liquid starlight. That then gets centrifuged into dust, which smelts into ingots. Here's a quick tour of the moon base right now. Several high voltage solar panels, antimatter coming in, and the ore production system is functional, as well as all the processing going on around here in the basement and the compact machine. It's a good thing I set all this up in space. The main downside of this lava production method is all the power it eats up. The magma crucible alone takes almost 1000 RF per tick. The blast chiller is kinda cheap, but the crucible takes so much. In order to mass produce nitro crystals, I'll need a ton of nether stars. I can change the spawner I found in the first quarry site to spawning wither skeletons using a spawn egg, and then make a system to have them almost die so that I can get skulls with some beheading and looting. Or so you would think. There's a better way of doing this. This took a lot of testing, but I finally got a husk to be able to kill wither skeletons without dying itself. This uses Botania's high side dream, which forces mobs to fight each other. You could probably accomplish this with 2 spawners, but my way is more efficient. If the husk lands a killing blow, it will force 3 skulls to drop. The husk is armored, so it'll take less damage. The decoctive diffuser deploys harming potions to heal the husk, and wooden spikes in a weakness trap help in killing the skeletons. This then gets picked up by a vacuumulator and is sent back to the refined storage system. I'm gonna fight the withers manually for now, but the skulls are the longest part. I could use a life imbuer on the spawner with some mana to automate it, but for right now I think this is okay. As I said before, turning health potions into a gas and crystallizing it nets crystals of life. I can use them for nitro crystals. This setup is more or less the same for the other potion crystals, excluding the actual crystals used to make them and of course the potions that make those crystals. Given that nitro crystals take a lot of energy to craft, I also need to upgrade my energizing rods to the Niotic tier. With 3 of them, that's 2100 aura per tick. Good thing I'm making a better generator to keep it going. The reactor builds itself as long as you have all the necessary materials. It shapes into a 3x4x3 box vertically. It has slots for uraninite fuel, redstone, coal, and coolant in both liquid and solid form, which all increase its energy production. You can also set it to automatically turn on or off in the event it's producing while the system is full. And despite being on the moon, Flux Networks makes it easy to bring the power back home. This reactor will produce 80,000 aura per tick, which is enough for basically the rest of the game, minus one particular thing. I'm going with cryotheum as the reactor's coolant, as it lasts a very long time and offers the best energy generation. Time for yet another new toy. Some ores aren't produced by the antimatter setup, so the digital miner is going to make up for what I don't have. You can use it to whitelist what ores you want mined. It'll mine in a square with a 32 block radius from the miner's center. In particular, niter, osmium, and desh are all things I can get pretty quickly. I could stand to finally automatically produce life essence. By melting down crystals of life and pumping it into the blood altar, I no longer have to worry about needing to fill the altar for ore processing. That being said, I don't have the main altar hooked up yet, so manual crafting will have to use the knife still. This at least feeds the ritual and alchemy tables, though, so I won't randomly get nausea when the system runs dry. Using that same process with strength potion yields crystals of power, which I can use to make larger factory installers. Of course, these change the slots from 3 to 5 compared to the basic ones. Installers must be used sequentially, so you can't skip straight to the final tier. Also, I made a new room for the basic Mekanism machines. This won't fit the really big stuff, but all the regular infusion machines can fit in here nicely, as well as an extra multi-servo press in the event I need more copper plates, as those are usually in large batches. A new base, but underwater? It's under construction. To build underwater, the bubble will keep the water away in a decently large radius. Of course you have to supply it with mana. The actual building will be done using the Aura Tools Builder, defined to go in the shape of a dome. Apply a redstone signal, and if the chest on top has the materials, it'll construct the desired shape. I'll have to sponge away the remaining water though. To get in, I can set up a teleporter. These are single pair gateways that link right to another place with no GUIs. Much easier than setting up travel anchors. It just needs power on one end and an ID to link the two together. Eventually, I plan on setting one up on the moon so I won't have to deal with giving myself 3 levels of XP from the Insightful Crystal every time I want to go to the moon base. The underwater base won't be ready for a while though, so this will come into play later. Blah blah blah, fire resistance potions, blah blah blah, crystals of inertia, you get the point, alchemical imbuers, automated. And now, high-density polyethylene, also known as plastic. This is the most condensed I could get this system, but the footprint is still pretty small. All it takes is a cloche for potatoes, water, some power, and some machines. HDPE gets used a lot in later Mekanism recipes. Could I make a gas-burning generator? Yes. Would it be stupid strong? Yes. Will I make one? No. We have the power reactor already, I don't need more power. Elite factories require alpha steel. This can easily be made using Mythic Botany's own superior terrasteel setup. It is rather pricey with 2 pools of mana per ingot, but with the mana generation we already have, it isn't that bad. I don't require massive amounts of alpha steel for anything other than these upgrades. Apparently, it won't draw from any sparks though that don't have a recessive augment, or it won't draw itself if it doesn't have a dominant augment, so just keep that in mind. I do want to make a little more progress in blood magic, so after making an alchemical reaction chamber, which can process saturated Tau into weak blood shards, these turn into bloodstone bricks, which can upgrade the altar to its 4th and final tier. Since demon stone and blank slates are cumbersome to craft, I might as well hook that up to their fine storage system. Since fluids aren't a machine, a chest and some pipes will have to do. Also, if you want to craft with the blood altar faster on the manual side of things, perhaps an acceleration wand would help. It greatly increases the tick speed, so it increases the consumption rate of the altar and thus its crafting speed. Now's a good time to show off the RF Tools Crafter. It can hold up to 8 recipes in it at a time, and it has a lot of options for how it does its auto crafting. In particular, this XC type of crafting is the most useful for blood magic runes, as the orb doesn't get consumed. This means that if the orb isn't consumed, which obviously I just said it's not, it'll stay in the crafting grid input, while everything else gets sent to the output. I've also automated slate production using some nodes. Because it's blood magic nodes with a blood magic altar, of course it's going to work. Remember that you can limit the stack size to 1 if you want to craft only 1 slate at a time. However, this won't work with different types of slates as they craft sequentially. Using this new tier 4 altar, I can turn the weak blood shard into a master blood orb. This of course has the highest capacity for life points, and will be used in the highest tier crafting recipes. It does take a lot of blank runes, as you can see, to make this altar, so make sure you have proper infrastructure and preferably auto-crafting before doing it. So next time I think I'll tackle some more remixes, and thanks for watching. So this has been Pick, I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.